Sometimes the most unexpected betrayals are the ones that shatter our entire reality. Picture a loving mother, a devoted wife stepping into the grand lobby of the Hyatt Regency in downtown Chicago, her pulse quickening at the thought of surprising her husband on his routine business trip. Yet instead of his welcoming embrace, she is greeted by a sight that rips her world apart. A tender kiss shared between him and a mysterious woman in a sleek black coat. In that single heart-stopping moment, everything changes. Secrets spill into the open heart's break, and as a new chapter begins, it unfolds into a storm of regret, revenge, and the ultimate fight for hope. Emma Davenport woke to the sound of her alarm clock vibrating stubbornly on the bedside table, its gentle buzzing a relentless reminder of the hectic day ahead. She blinked herself awake momentarily, disoriented by the early dawn light cutting through the thin curtains. For a moment, she simply lay there, taking in the comforting smell of fresh linen and the faint lemony tang of the cleaning spray she always used. Next to her, the bed was cold and empty. Mark had left for Chicago the previous afternoon, attending yet another financial conference as part of his ever-demanding job at Harper & Green Investments. Their 3-year-old daughter Lily stirred in the next room. Emma could hear the soft hum of a lullaby, playing from the child's nightlight, a small giraffe that projected stars onto the ceiling. She swung her legs off the bed and headed to Lily's room, her mind already flipping through the day's tasks. She planned to surprise Mark in Chicago that evening. Over the last few months, an uneasy feeling had gnawed at her, a suspicion she kept pushing aside. While Mark claimed to be overwhelmed with work, she wanted to see for herself if everything was really as he said. She scooped Lily into her arms, inhaling the sweet baby shampoo in her daughter's hair. A wave of resolve swept over her. For years, she had trusted Mark blindly. He was the calm, steady presence in her life, a man who made time for bedtime stories and neighborhood barbecues even as he rose through the ranks of his firm. Yet something had changed. It was in the way he avoided her eyes at the dinner table, in the vague excuses he made after late-night phone calls. Emma needed clarity, and she was determined to get it. Despite her growing worries, Emma couldn't forget the man who once charmed her with fresh daisies on their first date. In the early days, Mark was her everything. They had met by chance at an art gallery in downtown Seattle, introduced by mutual acquaintances. Emma had been immediately drawn to his warm laugh and quiet confidence. They shared a passion for exploring museums, volunteering at local charities, and dreaming of a future filled with travel love and children. But as Mark climbed higher in his career, work trips became the norm. It started slowly, a day trip to Los Angeles, a 2-night conference in Boston. Emma had brushed off any concerns back then, reminding herself that she had married a man with ambition. His success was their success. But with each promotion, Mark's job demands soared. His phone was forever buzzing with new messages. His eyes flickered with tension whenever she asked questions. A month ago, Emma found a receipt in Mark's coat pocket from the St. Regis Hotel in Chicago. It was for a lavish dinner for 2. Mark had told her it was merely a networking meal with a prospective client named Mr. Townsend. Yet the scrawled signature on the receipt wasn't Mark's handwriting. Alarm bells rang in Emma's mind, but she was too afraid to push him, afraid of what she might learn. In the back of her mind, she clung to a fragile hope that there was an innocent explanation. That morning, as she kissed Lily goodbye and entrusted her to the care of her mother, Linda Pierce, Emma's nerves twisted in her stomach. She told herself she was just going to surprise Mark, to remind him that his family was right here, waiting and loving him. She prayed that her doubts were unfounded, and that by nightfall they would be laughing about her silly suspicions. She had no idea that what she would witness in a few short hours would change everything. The drive from their suburban home in Lake Forest to Chicago was typically just over an hour, but traffic stretched it to nearly 2. Emma found herself tapping her fingers anxiously on the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the clock every few minutes. She had planned her arrival to coincide with Mark's break between conference sessions. The plan was simple: appear in the hotel lobby around 7 in the evening. Text him to meet her by the grand staircase and greet him with a heartfelt kiss. She hoped the spontaneity would reignite the spark that had dwindled over the past year. As she navigated the bustling city streets, Emma remembered how much she used to love Chicago. She had attended college here years ago and always found an unmatched energy in its towering skyline. Now the once exciting metropolis felt daunting, its tall buildings pressing in on her. She turned onto Michigan Avenue, weaving through throngs of pedestrians. With every mile, her heart pounded faster. She parked in an underground garage and made her way to the Hyatt Regency, an enormous structure that soared above the city. Emma swiped a bit of lipstick across her lips, checked her reflection in the mirrored panels near the revolving doors, and took a calming breath. She tried not to let her anxious thoughts overshadow her intentions. If she was going to face Mark, it had to be with confidence. Clutching her purse, she stepped into the grand lobby, with its marble floors and lofty ceilings. She could almost imagine Mark's surprised grin, the way he'd lift her up in a twirl. But as she scanned the opulent space, she didn't see him at the lounge or by the registration desk. Instead, she saw something else, something that made her freeze in her tracks. There near the bar area, under soft golden lights, sat Mark. He wasn't alone. A woman with dark, cascading hair leaned close, her hand resting intimately on his arm. Emma's brain struggled to process what she was seeing. For a second, she prayed it was some misunderstanding. Perhaps this was a colleague, and they were discussing business details. But then Mark turned to the woman, and their lips met in a slow, unmistakably romantic kiss. Emma felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Numbness washed over her entire body. Her feet rooted to the spot, and it was as if the rest of the world faded away, leaving only the horrifying sight of her husband kissing a stranger. It was surreal, like a bad dream from which she couldn't wake. She stood there not more than 20 feet away, unnoticed by Mark. The woman, elegantly dressed in a fitted black coat, pulled back and gazed adoringly at him. Emma recognized that look. It was the look of someone deeply involved. She realized with acute clarity that this wasn't just a casual fling. This was something that had been going on long enough for them to appear entirely at ease in public. Tears pricked the back of her eyes, but fury overcame her shock. How dare he do this here so blatantly? She wanted to stride across the lobby, slap him, make a scene. 1,000 impulses warred in her mind. Heartbreak, anger, confusion, and the fragile remains of her dignity. Ultimately, she took a shaking breath and backed away, retreating into the shadows of the expansive corridor, leaving Mark and his mistress, who for now remained oblivious to Emma's presence. Emma didn't remember how she got from the hotel to the street. One moment, she was inside that marble lobby, watching Mark betray her. The next, she was stumbling onto the sidewalk, swallowing lungfuls of the frigid Chicago air. Her phone buzzed in her purse, but she couldn't bring herself to look at it. If it was Mark, she didn't want to talk to him. If it was anyone else, she couldn't summon the strength to explain what she'd just witnessed. For what felt like hours, she wandered aimlessly along the streets, tears streaming down her cheeks. She replayed the scene in her head over and over, each iteration stabbing deeper than the last. Glimpses of their life together flashed before her eyes. Mark's smile on their wedding day, the time he wept with joy when Lily was born, the nights he would scoop her into his arms and promise her the world. How could that same man now be kissing another woman without remorse? Eventually, she found herself standing near a small park, the lights from a nearby cafe illuminating the tears on her face. She sank onto a bench and let her emotions course through her. Anger flared white-hot, mingling with heartbreak. She wanted answers, yet the thought of confronting Mark right now was too much to bear. Her phone buzzed again. Summoning her nerve, she pulled it out to see a text from her mother Linda, who asked, "How's the surprise going? Is Mark excited?" Lily's asking for her daddy. Emma's gut twisted as she read the words. How could she ever explain this to Lily? She typed a quick, shaky reply. "Not great. I'll be home soon." Then she hailed a taxi back to her car, her mind already plotting her next move. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She paced the living room, waiting for Mark to return from Chicago. She had no intention of revealing she had gone there to see him. Let him try to lie his way out. First, she wanted to see how deep his betrayal would go. Around midnight, Mark finally strode into the house with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and the faint smell of hotel soap clinging to his skin. "Hey, honey," he greeted, sounding casual, almost loving, as though nothing was amiss. "Conference ran late. You didn't have to wait up." Emma forced a tight smile. "I wanted to see you," she replied coolly. In truth, she was marveling at his ability to pretend. Her heart hammered against her ribcage, and she felt the urge to scream at him to demand he tell her the truth. But she waited, letting the tension build between them. Mark went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and offered Emma one as well. As he turned around, she fixed him with a steady gaze. "Did you have dinner with Mr. Townsend again?" she asked, voice trembling lightly. He hesitated, eyes flicking away for the briefest moment before returning to hers. "Yeah," he lied smoothly. It was all business, just like before. Emma's anger flared at the blatant untruth. She clenched her fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She could feel her composure crumbling. Suddenly she snapped. "Stop lying to me, Mark. I saw you." His glass of water slipped from his fingers, shattering on the tile floor. For a moment, neither of them moved. The confession hung in the air heavier than the tension that preceded it. "Saw me," he whispered, face draining of color. Emma gulped a shaky breath, eyes brimming with tears. "I was at the Hyatt tonight. I saw you with her." She spat the final word with venom, each syllable echoing with betrayal. Mark's mind whirred as he scrambled to regain control of the situation. Emma watched his expressions shift from shock to denial, then to something like desperation. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally managed. "It's not what you think." Emma laughed a harsh, broken sound. "Oh, really? Because it looked like you and that woman were pretty cozy," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Is she your mistress?" Mark raked a hand through his hair. She's Veronica Graham," he admitted, voice low. "She's a colleague from the firm. We've been seeing each other." Emma's stomach lurched, and she turned away, unable to look at him. Of all the words she expected to hear, his direct admission of guilt was both validating and soul-crushing. Why, she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and hurt. Why would you do this to us?" He took a faltering step forward, only to stop when he saw her recoil. "It just happened." Mark tried, his voice shaking. "I've been under a lot of stress. Veronica understands my work. She's there late at night, pulling the same hours, dealing with the same pressures." "Don't!" Emma hissed, tears streaking her face. "Don't you dare reduce this to stress and late nights. We have a child, Mark. We had a life." He wiped a hand across his face. "I never stopped loving you," he insisted. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." "That's a convenient word," she spat, "and one that doesn't mean much now. You think you can just come back, say it was a mistake, and everything is fine." She turned away again, her voice dropping to a pained whisper. "I trusted you." Mark tried to speak, but she cut him off with a trembling hand. "It's too late for apologies. You made your choice." With that, she fled to their bedroom, leaving him alone in the kitchen, shards of broken glass and cold water pooling around his feet, a fitting metaphor for the ruin of their marriage. Emma had always believed she could handle anything if she and Mark faced it together, but that night, as she curled into a tight ball on their bed, she realized she was on her own. The magnitude of his betrayal crushed her. The man she thought she knew inside and out had been leading a double life. How could she ever trust him again? Throughout the night, Emma wrestled with her thoughts. She heard Mark downstairs making phone calls, likely to Veronica. She wondered if he was telling her that Emma knew. The idea of them discussing her pain so casually left her furious and humiliated. She knew she couldn't stay in that house, playing the role of dutiful wife while Mark sorted out his affair. When Lily's soft cries broke the silence at dawn, Emma rose mechanically. She realized with sudden clarity what she had to do. She needed to leave. Emma's first priority was her daughter, protecting her from the fallout of this nightmare. As Lily's innocent eyes opened, Emma forced a reassuring smile onto her face, but inside her heart was in shreds. Once Lily was fed and dressed, Emma scribbled a short note for Mark. "I'm taking Lily away for a while. Don't follow us. We need space." She set the note on the kitchen counter, next to the shards of broken glass that still lay there from the night before Mark hadn't even bothered to clean them up. It was symbolic, she realized, of how little he cared for order, now that his secret was out. Emma packed a suitcase, taking only essentials. She called her mother, but Linda didn't pick up. She didn't leave a voicemail. She wanted to make her move before Mark woke up. Give herself a head start. Within half an hour, Emma had Lily strapped into the back seat of the car and was pulling away from the life she had known. She drove eastward, not entirely sure where she was going. Emma had distant relatives in Michigan, an aunt named Eleanor, who'd moved to a lakeside property near Traverse City. It was a place Emma had visited a few times in childhood. Aunt Eleanor and Emma's mother had never been close, but Emma remembered her aunt as a kind, if somewhat reserved woman. With no other plan in mind, Emma dialed the number she found in an old address book tucked away in the glove compartment. To her relief, Eleanor picked up on the second ring, after a hasty explanation that left out most details. Emma asked if she and Lily could stay for a while. "We just need to get away," she confessed in a trembling voice. Despite years of little contact, Eleanor hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. The promise of a temporary haven calmed Emma's racing heart. She pressed down on the accelerator, determined to put as much distance as possible between them and Mark. Lily dozed in the back seat, hugging her little stuffed elephant. Every now and then Emma glanced in the rear-view mirror, tears stinging her eyes. She felt guilty uprooting Lily's life, but she believed she was protecting her daughter from the emotional storm. For now, at least they would be safe in a remote lakeside cottage, away from the chaos Mark's actions had unleashed. As the cityscape gave way to open highway, and then rolling farmland, Emma's thoughts drifted to what would happen next. She had no clear plan. The heartbreak was too fresh to think about lawyers or custody battles. But one thing was sure: she would not let Mark's betrayal define her or harm Lily. If he wanted to keep playing the role of an unfaithful husband, he would do it alone. Mark awoke in an empty house. The silence, usually comforting after a long trip, felt suffocating. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at his phone. No new messages from Emma. Confusion prickled at his mind. Normally Lily would be chattering in the living room, or Emma would have breakfast ready. He rolled out of bed, the events of the previous night seeping back into his consciousness like a poison. He found Emma's note on the kitchen counter. His stomach lurched as he read it. "I'm taking Lily away for a while. Don't follow us. We need space." Shock turned to panic. She was gone, and she had taken Lily. Mark ran a hand through his hair, guilt and fear swirling together. He reached for his phone, dialing Emma's number, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried Linda's number, hoping her mother would have some information, but Linda sounded just as alarmed when Mark mentioned Emma's disappearance. "What do you mean she's gone?" Linda demanded. "She left Lily with me yesterday morning. Now you're saying she took Lily away." When Mark's stunned silence answered her question well enough, and Linda hung up in anger, promising to find her daughter, Mark paced the house like a trapped animal, scanning for any sign of where Emma might have gone. He scoured her desk drawers, the bedroom closet, even the attic. There was no clue. All he found were the heartbreakingly empty spaces where Emma's clothes had been. The realization that she had planned this departure, packed Lily's things, wrote the note, and left without looking back, crushed him. He knew he had done this. He was the one who'd introduced deceit into their marriage. And now, facing the consequences, the depth of his regret began to sink in. But regret wouldn't bring Emma back. If he wanted to salvage anything, he would have to take drastic steps to win back his family's trust, assuming Emma would even give him the chance. Days stretched into a week, and still Emma did not return. Mark reached out to everyone he could think of: mutual friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives, but no one knew where Emma and Lily might be. In a moment of desperation, Mark confided in his best friend and co-worker, James Overton. James's advice was blunt. "You need a lawyer." Reluctantly, Mark scheduled an appointment with Rebecca Slater, a top family law attorney in Chicago. Sitting in her sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Mark felt exposed and vulnerable. Rebecca studied him from behind her large mahogany desk, her expression unreadable. "So your wife left," she stated, scanning over the initial paperwork he had filled out, "and she took your child with her. Have you received any official communication regarding a divorce or custody arrangement?" Mark shook his head. "No. She left a note. That's it." "I've tried calling, texting, no response." Rebecca folded her hands. "Did you give her cause?" Mark's face burned. He cleared his throat. I had an affair." She found out. Rebecca nodded her gaze, never wavering. Infidelity can certainly precipitate drastic actions. "Look, we can file a petition for a formal custody arrangement, but if she hasn't filed for divorce yet, it's a bit tricky. Are you sure you want to go down that path immediately? Sometimes it escalates things beyond repair." Mark hesitated, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. All he truly wanted was to fix things with Emma, to apologize, to beg her forgiveness. But Emma was gone, and he had no idea how to reach her. "I just want to see my daughter," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." Rebecca's face softened slightly. "Let's hold off on immediate legal action. I'll do some private searching, see if we can find out where she might be staying. Once we know that, you can decide how to proceed. In the meantime, gather financial statements, property details, everything." Mark left her office feeling more lost than ever. He had set a ruinous ball in motion by kissing Veronica that night in the hotel lobby, by allowing their affair to blossom in the first place. Now, with Emma and Lily vanished, he realized the gaping void where his family used to be. For the first time, the possibility of never seeing them again crushed him beyond measure. Emma found a quiet solace in Aunt Eleanor's lakeside home. The weather was beginning to warm, melting the last patches of snow around the cabin's perimeter. Lily, oblivious to the drama unfolding, loved splashing at the shoreline with her tiny boots. She giggled when the cold water touched her toes and made a game of collecting shiny pebbles. Aunt Eleanor was an enigma. She did not pry for details about Emma's sudden arrival. Instead, she offered the comforts of home warm meals, a cozy bedroom, and an ample supply of patient understanding. Emma was grateful for the sanctuary. When she couldn't sleep at night, she'd wander down to the dock, staring out at the moonlit lake. The stillness of the water mirrored her new sense of limbo, not quite sure where she was headed, but certain she couldn't go back to the life she left. One evening, Aunt Eleanor joined Emma on the dock, handing her a steaming mug of tea. They stood in silence for a while, the night breeze rippling across the lake's surface. Finally, Eleanor spoke in her measured, quiet voice. "I don't need to know everything that happened, dear, but I can see the pain in your eyes." Emma nodded, tears brimming. "He cheated," she said. Simply. "I saw him, there's no doubt." Aunt Eleanor inhaled slowly. "I'm so sorry," she replied, setting a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "I'd never presume to tell you what to do, but know that if you need time, or if you need someone to lean on, I'm here." Emma exhaled shakily. "I just can't believe he'd throw away our family like that. Now I'm afraid of the future. Afraid he'll try to take Lily, or that I'll never be able to stand on my own 2 feet again." Eleanor's gaze was firm, yet kind. "Emma, you're stronger than you think. Start with today. Focus on what you need right now to keep yourself and Lily safe and stable." Over the following weeks, Emma took on small tasks to help Eleanor around the property. She found a moment of peace in the rhythm of raking leaves and planting new flowers. Lily thrived on the freedom chasing after butterflies and squealing with delight whenever a duck paddled near the shore. The constant ache of betrayal was still there, but day by day, Emma felt a small kernel of strength grow within her. While Emma and Lily found an uneasy peace in Michigan, Mark's mistress Veronica, Graham, was facing her own challenges. In the aftermath of Emma's disappearance, Mark had distanced himself from Veronica, plagued by guilt and worry. Their once passionate affair, fueled by late-night strategy sessions and stolen kisses in the office corridor, had begun to sour under the weight of real-life consequences. Veronica was no stranger to ambition. She thrived in the fast-paced environment of Harper & Green Investments. But rumors circulated quickly in corporate hallways. Whispers of the married Mark Davenport's affair reached many ears, and it didn't take long for people to link it to Veronica. The sly looks and hushed judgments weighed on her every time she walked into the office. She confronted Mark about his sudden coldness one evening, when he agreed to meet her at a discreet cafe near their workplace. "I feel like you're punishing me for something." "We both chose," Veronica said. frustration evident in her voice. Mark rubbed his forehead. He looked tired, older somehow. "I'm not punishing you," he insisted. I'm worried about Emma and Lily." "She's gone, Veronica. I have no clue where she is. And it's my fault." Veronica reached out to take his hand, but Mark pulled away. The rejection stung. "You can't blame yourself entirely," she tried. "We both knew what we were doing. Emma finding out, well, that was never going to be clean or easy." Mark stared into his coffee cup. "That doesn't help," he said, voice hollow. "I need to make this right, but I don't even know how. Everything is a mess." Realizing the rift that had formed, Veronica felt resentment rise within her. She had risked her reputation and emotional well-being for a man who now seemed bent on retreating into his guilt. Still, she clung to the hope that she and Mark could weather the storm. After all, their bond went beyond mere lust, or so she believed. Frustrated by Rebecca Slater's slow progress and desperate for answers, Mark hired a private investigator named Jason Rudd. Jason came highly recommended by James Overton, who had once used him for a sensitive corporate matter. Though Mark felt uneasy about spying on his own wife, he rationalized that he had no other choice if he wanted to see Lily again. Jason was a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and penetrating eyes. He listened intently as Mark recounted the night Emma left the note and the total lack of communication since. "She's not using her credit cards or her phone. At least I can't trace anything," Mark explained anxiously. Jason nodded. "She's being cautious. Likely she's using cash or a secondary bank account you're not aware of." He tapped a pen against his notepad. "Any family she might rely on. Friends outside your circle." Mark thought about Emma's mother, but Linda didn't seem to know anything. Then he remembered Emma's father had passed away years ago. She has an aunt, I think, on her mother's side. Eleanor something. They weren't very close. Jason jotted down the name. Eleanor. "That's a start." He handed Mark a stack of forms. "Sign these. I'll check phone records, any property ownership under that name. It might take a while, but we'll find them." As Mark complied, his heart pounded with conflicting emotions. Hiring a PI felt like a violation of Emma's privacy, but the alternative, doing nothing, left him paralyzed. The memory of her tear-streaked face the night she confronted him sliced through his guilt. He told himself he was doing this for Lily's sake, to be a father again, to fix what he'd broken. A small part of him feared what he'd say if he actually found Emma. Could they repair the marriage? Would she ever forgive him? Each question led to more uncertainty. Yet, Mark pushed forward, fueled by desperation. Weeks passed in Michigan. Emma's life fell into a quiet, routine breakfast with Aunt Eleanor, and Lily walks by the lake, occasional trips to the small town for groceries. She had saved enough money to sustain them for a while, and Aunt Eleanor refused any rent payments, insisting Emma's presence was enough. Still, Emma knew she couldn't hide forever. She spent her nights reading about divorce laws, spousal support, and child custody. The words swam before her tired eyes, overwhelming her with legal jargon. She jotted questions in a notebook, hoping to someday get real legal advice. One afternoon, Emma received a phone call on the new prepaid cell phone she had purchased under a false name. To her surprise, it was Linda Pierce, her mother. Emma froze, torn between her desire to talk to the woman who raised her and her fear that Mark might be tracking their communication. "Mum," Emma whispered, stepping out onto the cabin's porch. "Oh, thank God," Linda exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. "Emma, are you all right? Mark told me you left, but he doesn't know where you are." Emma hesitated, tears springing to her eyes. She missed her mother desperately, but she also feared that Linda might share her location with Mark. "We're safe," she managed. "I can't tell you where, though." "Not yet." Linda sniffled. "I won't force you, but please know I'm worried." "Lily is okay." "She's fine, Mum. She's healthy and happy." Emma looked toward the lake where Lily was chasing after a butterfly. He betrayed me, Mum. I can't go back. Not now." "I understand," Linda replied. "I don't know what to think of Mark anymore. He seems genuinely torn up. But this is your decision, dear. Just promise me you'll stay in touch. I won't tell him anything you don't want me to." Emma allowed herself a tiny measure of comfort. "Thank you, Mum. I'll call again soon." As the call ended, Emma felt a strange combination of relief and guilt. She had reconnected with her mother, but she still felt guilty for cutting off Mark entirely. Yet every time she pictured him with that other woman, the heartbreak flared anew. She reminded herself she was protecting Lily, and she had no obligation to rush back into Mark's arms. Back in Chicago, Jason Rudd's investigation bore fruit. He discovered that a certain Eleanor Pierce owned a modest lakeside property near Traverse City, Michigan. Public records indicated a recent utility spike suggesting new occupants. Jason presented his findings to Mark in a manila envelope one morning at a discreet coffee shop. "This is likely where your wife is staying," Jason said matter-of-factly. "Based on what I've gathered, she's been there for at least a few weeks." Mark's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. A property deed with Eleanor Pierce's name, some bank transactions for groceries, a few photographs of Emma's car, parked discreetly off the main road. Guilt and hope twisted together in his chest. She was within driving distance, alive and well with Lily. "What do I do now?" Mark asked quietly. Jason shrugged. "That's your call. Legally, you can attempt to force her to return, or at least negotiate custody. But if you truly want to reconcile, showing up with a court order might not be the best approach." Mark swallowed hard, thinking of Emma's tearful face. "I just want to see my daughter," he repeated. "I want Emma to know how sorry I am." Jason gave him a curt nod. "Then go. But I'd advise you do it gently." Fueled by this revelation, Mark set out that same afternoon. The drive seemed endless, his thoughts a maelstrom. Would Emma slam the door in his face? Would she let Lily see him? Did he even deserve forgiveness? Each mile brought him closer to answers he might not be ready to hear. Late evening shadows stretched across the gravel road as Mark pulled up to the address Jason had provided. The cottage stood near the water's edge, lights glowing softly inside. Mark parked a short distance away, heart pounding in his ears. He approached the front porch, his mouth dry as sand. His footsteps sounded unnaturally loud on the wooden steps. Before he could knock, the door swung open, revealing Aunt Eleanor. She regarded him calmly, her lips a thin line of disapproval. "Mark," she said, voice cool. "I knew you'd come eventually." He nodded, swallowing hard. "May I see Emma?" Eleanor stepped aside, but didn't invite him in. "I'll get her. Wait here." Moments later, Emma appeared in the doorway. Her face paled at the sight of him, and she instinctively turned to check on Lily, who was napping in another room. Closing the door behind her, she joined him on the porch, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. "How did you find us?" she demanded, voice trembling with anger. Mark clenched and unclenched his fists. "I had to. I hired a PI." "Emma, I'm sorry." "Sorry," she repeated bitterly. "You come here with a private investigator's evidence spying on me and say you're sorry." He blinked back tears. I couldn't just do nothing. Emma, please. I had to see Lily. I'm not here to take her away. I want to see my daughter. And I want to talk. Can we please talk? Emma stared at him, her emotions warring across her face. She glanced back at the cottage where Aunt Eleanor hovered in the doorway. Finally, she exhaled. Fine. But Lily is asleep, and I don't want you waking her. We'll talk on the dock. Mark nodded, following her across the small yard to the lakeside dock. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting an ethereal glow over the surface. They stopped at the edge, the gentle sound of lapping waves filling the tension between them. They stood in silence for a moment, before Mark spoke, his voice cracking. I've been going crazy not knowing where you were, if you were safe. Emma's jaw tightened. I'm safe enough, she replied, her gaze fixed on the dark water. And Lily is fine too. No thanks to you. Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. I deserve that. Emma, I don't know if it helps, but I ended things with Veronica. I told her it's over. I'm willing to quit my job if that's what it takes to show you I'm serious about our marriage. Emma turned to look at him, tears glistening in her eyes. Our marriage? She echoed. You broke our marriage the moment you slept with her. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was for me to see you two together in that lobby? His own eyes grew misty. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I was an idiot. I got caught up in the pressures of work, the excitement there's no excuse. I just want a chance to make it right. Emma laughed bitterly, tears spilling over. Make it right. How, Mark? You expect me to pretend this never happened, to forget the image of you kissing her? Her voice shook with anger. You lied to me. You lied about business trips, about dinners with Mr. Townsend. You chose her over us. I never chose her over you. Mark insisted, his words tumbling out. I was confused. Emma raised a trembling hand, stopping him. That's the thing, Mark. You did choose her every time you went to her hotel room or stayed late at the office for those so-called meetings. Now it's too late to say it was a mistake. The damage is done. Mark's breath hitched. Do you hate? Emma's tears fell in earnest. I hate what you've done. I hate that I have to look at Lily and know you betrayed us. She shook her head. But I'm also hurt, and part of me still loves you. I hate that the most. A choking sob escaped Mark's lips. He reached out to her, but she stepped back. They stood there raw and wounded under the moonlight, an unbridgeable chasm between them. Their conversation stretched into the late hours. Emma refused to let Mark inside the cottage, but she eventually relented to his request to see Lily in the morning. They sat under the starlight, discussing logistics, how Mark might visit without driving Emma away for good, how to handle finances in the interim. When Emma finally slipped back into the cottage, Mark slept fitfully in his car. His mind reeled from the confrontation, from Emma's tearful rage, from the faint glimmer of hope that she had not declared outright that their marriage was over. At dawn, Lily's voice roused Emma from sleep. The child was excited to see the ducks on the lake, babbling in her toddler speak. Emma's heart clenched, knowing Mark was waiting just outside. She made a quick decision and led Lily to the porch. There Mark stood with dark circles under his eyes and a weary smile. "Hi, sweetheart," he said softly, crouching down to Lily's eye level. The child looked unsure, hugging Emma's leg. For a moment, heartbreak flickered across Mark's face. He reached out gently, and Lily hesitated before stepping forward. "Daddy missed you," he whispered, pulling her into a delicate hug. Emma watched tears brimming again. She reminded herself that Lily deserved a father, even if he was flawed. That tiny moment of reunion was enough to tear at Emma's carefully constructed wall. Part of her wanted to lash out and push him away. Another part wanted to bury her face in his chest to recall the warmth of the man she had loved. They spent a tense half-hour together, Mark helping Lily feed the ducks. Emma standing off to the side, arms folded protectively. When Lily asked if Daddy was coming home, Emma felt the sting of tears once again. She shook her head silently, unable to speak. Mark glanced at her, his eyes filled with regret. "Let's take this one step at a time," he murmured, more to Emma than to Lily. She gave him a curt nod, swallowing the pain, and hoping, for Lily's sake, that they could find a way to coexist, whatever that might look like. Over the following days, Mark rented a small cabin in the same area, a few miles down the lake. Emma allowed him carefully supervised visits with Lily, ensuring the child didn't suffer the sting of confusion or broken promises. It was an uneasy truce. Emma refused to discuss a permanent reconciliation. Her wounds were still too fresh. But she also didn't push for an immediate divorce, torn between her lingering love for Mark and her deep-seated anger. Aunt Eleanor silently observed the delicate dance between them, offering Emma private words of support, but never overstepping. She saw the torment in Emma's eyes and recognized the complexity of heartbreak, betrayal, and love colliding. Occasionally, Emma and Mark found themselves talking about mundane things, Lily's bedtime routines, her favorite songs, or what she ate for lunch. These trivial exchanges felt odd, yet somehow comforting. They were a reminder of the normalcy they once shared. Meanwhile, Mark's guilt weighed heavily. He kept his distance, respecting Emma's boundary. Each time he saw Lily's face light up at his arrival, he felt a dual pang of joy and despair. Would he ever be fully forgiven? Or was he doomed to this half-life, desperately clinging to fatherhood, while Emma rebuilt her own world without him? A month into this arrangement, Veronica made an unannounced appearance. She had tracked Mark's sudden absence from work, discovered his leads about Emma's location, and decided to confront him. Her arrival sent shockwaves through the fragile peace Emma and Mark had established. Veronica showed up at Mark's rented cabin, her eyes blazing with anger and betrayal. "You haven't returned my calls or texts," she spat. "I had to find you on my own. So this is where you ran off to playing house with your wife again?" Mark stiffened. "It's not like that," he tried to explain. "Veronica, I told you it's over. Emma and Lily are my family. I'm trying to fix things." Veronica let out a scornful laugh. "Fix things? You think you can just walk away from me, from everything we shared?" She gestured around. "Did you expect me to just vanish so you could rebuild your perfect suburban life?" Mark felt a surge of irritation mixed with shame. "We made a mistake," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm owning up to it now. There's nothing more to say." Unfortunately, Emma had arrived at that exact moment, intending to drop Lily off for a short visit. She froze at the sight of Veronica, her heart pounding with renewed fury. The scene was all too much, a vicious reminder of the betrayal that had driven her here in the first place. Veronica turned at the sound of Emma's footsteps, her stare turning icy. "So this is the woman you ran away to," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. "Isn't it ironic? Emma, you ran, he chased you, and now the mistress is left behind." Before Emma could respond, Mark stepped forward. "Veronica, that's enough. This is between me and Emma." But Emma couldn't hold back her outrage. She marched up to Veronica, voice trembling. "Don't you dare twist this. You tore our marriage apart, and now you have the nerve to come here." Veronica's eyes flashed. "Your marriage was already in trouble, sweetheart. That's why Mark was with me in the first place." Emma's hand flew before she could stop herself, slapping Veronica hard across the face. Veronica staggered back, eyes wide with shock. Lily, who was strapped into a car seat behind Emma, began to cry at the commotion. Mark rushed to intervene. Tears burned in Emma's eyes. She realized how easily the veneer of civility had shattered. With a shaking breath, she turned to Mark. "This is exactly why I left," she said through gritted teeth. "There's no peace with you. It's all lies and chaos." And in that moment, Emma vowed she would finalize her decision. It was time to end this toxic circle and protect herself and her child once and for all. That evening, Emma called a divorce attorney in Traverse City named Michael Sanders, recommended by a local acquaintance. She explained her situation, the betrayal, her temporary residence, and her desire to protect Lily. Michael listened patiently, then laid out her options. "Given your circumstances, we can file here in Michigan, provided you establish residency," he explained. "But typically, jurisdiction could be contested by your husband if he files in Illinois. We'll need to act carefully to ensure your rights and Lily's interests are protected." Emma nodded, her hands trembling around the phone. She felt a strange clarity settle over her, like a burden lifting off her shoulders. She would no longer hide. She would fight for her daughter's stability and for her own future. The next day, she met Michael in person. His office was modest but tidy, and Emma found his demeanor reassuring. She handed him a stack of notes and documents she had painstakingly compiled, evidence of Mark's infidelity financial records, Lily's birth certificate. "I have to do this," she said, voice wavering. "I can't live in this in-between anymore." Michael patted her hand. "You're making a brave choice. We'll file the necessary paperwork. Be prepared your husband may contest it, and the process might get messy. But I'll guide you every step of the way." Emma exhaled. "Thank you," she whispered, tears hovering in her eyes. I want peace. For Lily and for myself." When Mark received the divorce papers by courier at his rented cabin, a wave of nausea nearly knocked him off balance. Even though he suspected this outcome, seeing it in black and white was a shock. The words hammered home the finality of what was happening. He hurried to Emma's cottage, ignoring the voice in his head that told him she might slam the door in his face. Aunt Eleanor answered her disapproval as evident as ever, but she allowed him to step inside when he begged for a moment of Emma's time. In the living room, Emma stood with her hands folded, her expression resigned. "You got the papers," she said calmly. Mark lifted the manila envelope. "Is this really what you want?" Emma swallowed, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed. "I don't see it any other way. You cheated on me, Mark, and then you brought all that chaos here. I can't expose Lily to that kind of turmoil. She deserves better." He sank onto the sofa, shaking his head. "I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me easily. But can't we try counseling or a trial separation? Do we have to go straight to divorce?" Emma softened for a second, her gaze drifting to the hallway where Lily was playing. "I wish I could say yes," she murmured. "But we tried coexisting. Look what happened. Veronica showed up and it all fell apart again. I can't keep living like this, Mark. My heart is broken. I need to move on." Mark felt tears sting his eyes. "What about custody?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't want to lose Lily." Emma's jaw tightened. We'll figure out an arrangement. She needs her father, but not if it means I'm constantly in agony. Mark nodded, tears slipping down his face. I understand. He stood clutching the divorce papers as though they weighed 1,000 pounds. Before leaving, he managed a broken whisper. I'm sorry, Emma. I love you. I always will. She didn't respond as he walked out the door. Only after he left did Emma allow herself the luxury of sinking to the floor, sobbing quietly, while Aunt Eleanor gently stroked her hair. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal filings, mediation sessions, and tense negotiations. Emma insisted on primary custody of Lily, with Mark allowed scheduled visitation. Despite his initial resistance, Mark eventually agreed. He realized that forcing a bitter custody battle would only hurt Lily, and he truly wanted the best for his daughter. Veronica, feeling the sting of rejection and the tarnish to her professional reputation, distanced herself from Mark and eventually left Harper & Green Investments to start over elsewhere. The last Mark heard, she had moved to New York, chasing another career opportunity, leaving Chicago and her entanglement with Mark behind. As the legalities of divorce progressed, Emma found unexpected support in her mother. Linda visited the lakeside cottage, bonding with Lily and offering Emma a shoulder to cry on. Slowly, Emma felt the suffocating pain, ease replaced by a cautious hope for the future. She began exploring freelance writing opportunities online, using her background in communications to earn an income. Mark, too, had to rebuild. He resigned from Harper & Green Investments after the scandal and took a lower-profile position at a smaller firm in the same industry. He attended therapy, trying to unravel the emotional blind spots that had led him astray. Though heartbreak lingered, he found solace in knowing he could still be part of Lily's life, visiting her on weekends and holidays according to the arrangement with Emma. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. The day Emma received the final decree, she stood by the lake once more, the wind ruffling her hair. A sense of bittersweet closure settled over her. She had loved Mark deeply, and part of her always would, but she understood now that love alone could not fix everything. Lily toddled up to her, holding a shiny pebble in her small hand. "For you, Mummy," she said, her eyes bright. Emma knelt down, taking the pebble and pulling Lily into a gentle hug. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's beautiful." In the distance, Aunt Eleanor watched with a soft smile. She remembered the frightened woman who had appeared on her doorstep all those months ago, searching for refuge. Now Emma stood taller, more assured, despite the heartbreak she had endured. That evening, Emma sat down at her laptop, beginning the process of searching for a place of her own, not too far from Aunt Eleanor's property. She wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by the serenity of nature, but she also needed to carve out an independent life. The phone rang a call from Mark. He was scheduled to see Lily that weekend. Emma's hand hovered over the phone for a moment before she answered. Their conversation was polite, cordial even. In that measured exchange, Emma recognized that while their romantic relationship might be irreparably broken, they could still strive for an amicable partnership as parents. And so life began anew for Emma Davenport, no longer a suburban wife living under the illusion of marital bliss, but a single mother forging her own path, confident in her ability to protect the tiny life in her care, and determined to heal her own wounded heart. This was the story of a shocking betrayal, a bold escape, and one mother's steadfast resolve to protect her child at all costs. Emma's world turned upside down the moment she discovered her husband in that hotel lobby. Yet she found the strength to leave and start over, even when her heart still ached with love and loss. Through family solitude and a fierce commitment to her daughter, she carved a new path for them both. Do you believe that walls can talk? That sometimes the very bricks around us hold stories too raw, too tangled to speak aloud? This is the story of a man who shattered hearts and trust in one swift stroke, erasing his unborn baby's name from the nursery wall. Little did he know that fate would carve that same name into the towering facade of his company's newest building. Love, ambition, betrayal, and redemption twist through every corridor of this tale. Buckle in for a journey that delves into hidden pasts and uncertain futures, where every character holds a key to a devastating secret. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Alexander Haven's corner office at Horizon Global Ventures. The golden light cast a halo on the gleaming awards and plaques that lined the walls, each one echoing the success that the Haven family had worked generations to achieve. Alexander, a tall, imposing figure with silver-streaked hair at just 38, leaned back in his leather chair, drumming his fingers on the polished mahogany desk. His gaze cold and distant, fixed on an ornate pen, an anniversary gift from his wife, Cassandra. In that moment, the pen symbolized everything that had once been simple and hopeful in his life. Now it only served as a reminder of secrets he had kept the people he had hurt. He had always prided himself on his ability to control every variable in his life. But as the afternoon light drifted across the office, he realized control had slipped through his fingers the very day he found out Cassandra was pregnant. They had never spoken much about children before. Sure, there were the passing fantasies of a large family, or a small one, depending on the day, but their careers always took center stage. Cassandra was a brilliant architect who had designed luxury estates from London to Bali. It was her passion, her calling. She had come from a humble background, and each building she created was a testament to how far she'd climbed. Alexander's phone buzzed. The name on the caller ID read Cassandra, and he felt a rush of guilt swirl inside him. She'd called 5 times that day, and each call had gone to voicemail. Now, perhaps out of reflex, he answered. Cassandra's voice was tight. She used his pet name, though the warmth that usually accompanied it was missing. "We need to talk. I'm at the house." Alexander swallowed. "I'll be there soon." He left the office without a backward glance, ignoring the stares of his employees as he stalked past glass-walled conference rooms. He drove to their estate on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling piece of land overshadowed by centuries-old oaks. The driveway alone was half a mile of winding pavement lined with perfectly manicured hedges. When he finally stepped inside, an uneasy silence welcomed him. Years ago, upon first acquiring the property, he and Cassandra had dreamed of filling those halls with laughter, children's voices, dinner parties, new memories. They even had a room at the end of the upstairs corridor, designated as a nursery, its walls once adorned with gentle pastel colors. A rocking chair Cassandra's grandmother had passed down, and a small name plaque they'd chosen for their soon-to-be child, the child who would never come. He found Cassandra in the nursery. The walls were now blank, the rocking chair shoved into a corner. She stood with her back to him, arms crossed, shoulders trembling. "What have you done?" Her voice was steady, yet thick with pain. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment. He had instructed the staff to repaint the nursery and remove all traces of the name they had once agreed upon Adrian. It had been a reckless, impulsive decision, one made out of heartbreak, and the fear of being haunted by a memory of what could have been. Losing the baby had hit him in a place he never knew existed, so he did the one thing that made sense at the time: erase everything that reminded him of it. Cassandra turned, revealing tears clinging to her lashes. "We never even talked about it," she whispered. "You just had them remove his name, like he never existed." "I couldn't stand it," Alexander said, his voice low. "Couldn't stand walking by this room and seeing that name every day. It hurt too much." She stared at him, eyes glassy with betrayal. "Hurt too much? For whom? For you?" She took a trembling breath. "Because I still dream of him at night. I wake up and forget he's gone. And now there's nothing left of him at all, except the emptiness." His throat burned. He wanted to hold her, to promise her it would be okay. But the chasm between them felt too wide. Cassandra brushed past him, leaving only the scent of her expensive perfume and heartbreak in the air. He stood in the barren nursery, haunted by the absence of the name that used to be there. He thought about how that single act of painting over a memory had torn him and Cassandra further apart, and he wondered if they would ever find their way back. Yet destiny had other plans. The name he'd buried was about to resurface in a place he'd never expect, etched in stone on the facade of a building that would soon reshape both their lives. Long before he met Cassandra, Alexander Haven was raised in a world of opulence. The Havens were a known name in Massachusetts, their family wealth tracing back to old shipping lines that made fortunes in the 19th century. Over time, their empire evolved into real estate investment banking and eventually high-tech ventures. Alexander's father, Gordon Haven, was a formidable presence, meticulous, shrewd, and intimidating. He had raised Alexander with the mantra, legacy. First everything else, second. While this instilled in Alexander a relentless drive for success, it also planted deep insecurities. He had grown to view relationships as stepping stones or potential pitfalls. Even in personal matters, he measured the risk and potential reward. Growing up, he rarely visited friends' homes, almost never had a slumber party or carefree evening away from the watchful eyes of his father and their entourage of staff. He was groomed for leadership, taught to win at any cost. Cassandra Delgado was nothing like the women in Alexander's social circle. A self-made prodigy, her architectural breakthroughs in eco-friendly designs caught the attention of environmentalists, real estate moguls, and philanthropists alike, including Bill and Melinda Gates, who admired her commitment to sustainability. Some whispered that she was on the short list to design a new philanthropic research center that Mark Zuckerberg was rumored to be funding. No one dared question her brilliance. She had an almost mystical ability to see aesthetics and engineering as two halves of the same whole. They met at a fundraising gala for a children's hospital in Boston. Cassandra was there to pitch a new pediatric ward design concept, one that would integrate nature-inspired spaces to comfort children during treatments. Alexander, ironically, was there to represent the Haven family's charitable giving, something that always gave them positive publicity, though the real philanthropic intentions were sometimes overshadowed by the press releases. Their connection was instant, and it went beyond physical attraction. Alexander, drawn to her fiery determination, found himself opening up in ways he never had. Cassandra, for her part, saw in him a man who yearned for genuine passion outside his business fortress. They talked about innovative building designs, philanthropic aspirations, and the ways architecture could shape a better future. Where Alexander was methodical, Cassandra was creative. Where he built walls, she tore them down. They married quickly, too quickly, some said, and formed what Boston's high society regarded as the power couple of the decade. At first, Alexander integrated Cassandra into the Haven empire, seamlessly trusting her insight to innovate in areas where the family's vision had grown stale. In turn, she reveled in the resources the Haven family's wealth provided, designing experimental complexes, advanced living facilities, and eco-conscious high-rises. Yet as the months wore on, Alexander's father Gordon began to question Cassandra's long-term loyalty. She wasn't from their world. Old money had a certain set of unspoken rules, and Cassandra wasn't one to follow them blindly. Over time, tensions rose. Cassandra refused to let the Haven name overshadow her personal identity. She pressed for her own brand recognition in architectural circles, which Gordon felt threatened the collective family prestige. Alexander stood uncomfortably between his father and his wife, often appeasing one at the expense of the other. Then came the pregnancy. For a moment, everything looked bright. Both Alexander and Cassandra believed that introducing a new life into their family might unify them in a deeper way. Gordon, too, softened at the idea of a grandchild to continue the Haven line. The baby would be named Adrian, after Cassandra's beloved grandfather, who had encouraged her to pursue architecture before he passed. The pregnancy also aligned with a major business venture. Alexander was spearheading an enormous real estate project in downtown Boston. He'd collaborated with City Hall to turn a derelict block into a modern corporate park, one that would bear the Haven name and stand as a testament to the family's ongoing influence. But fate was cruel. Complications led to a tragic miscarriage. Cassandra spiraled into grief, and Alexander retreated behind his stoic walls, shutting out his own pain. It was easier for him to bury it beneath new projects, negotiations, and deals than to face the magnitude of what they lost. And so the nursery remained untouched, a silent reminder until the day he decided to erase Adrian's name from its walls. The heartbreak in Cassandra's eyes that afternoon was not something that could be easily fixed. Their once tightly woven tapestry of ambition and love was unraveling. Little did either of them know just how violently the threads would be pulled apart by events lurking on the horizon. Time marched on. Work never stopped at Horizon Global Ventures. The real estate project that Alexander had been orchestrating, officially dubbed the Haven Complex, was inching closer to its grand unveiling. This multi-building campus promised to revitalize downtown Boston, merging state-of-the-art office spaces with green rooftops, large communal parks, and advanced energy-efficient technologies. Cassandra had contributed some early design concepts before her grief took her away from many responsibilities, and Alexander had allowed her that distance, not wanting to impose further stress. One crisp morning, Alexander's mind was spinning through a dozen tasks as he stepped out of his black SUV in front of the nearly completed Haven complex. He was there to do a final walkthrough before the massive media event scheduled 2 weeks later. Broad columns flanked an enormous plaza in the center of the development, lined with glass-clad towers that reached skyward. The sweet tang of fresh cement and the buzz of construction filled the air. His team of architects and investors trailed behind him, bustling with excitement to show off the progress. Alexander nodded politely, scanning the site with a practiced gaze. They crossed the plaza and approached the main tower, which soared upwards in shimmering glass and steel. A large ceremonial wall next to the entrance was reserved for a special unveiling, an inscription dedicated to the vision and future of the Haven legacy. Rumor had it that Alexander intended to carve a quote or place an emblem to commemorate the family's dedication to progress. Just as they were about to enter the tower, the site manager Miriam Kelly hurried up to Alexander with an odd look on her face. "Mr. Haven," she said, pushing her black-rimmed glasses up her nose. "We've discovered something on the decorative facade. It wasn't part of the official design, but it appears to be etched deep into the stone. It will take significant effort and time to remove." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Etched like graffiti?" "Not exactly. It's a name, sir." She paused, swallowing hard. "Adrian." In an instant, Alexander's heart dropped. He stiffened. The mere mention of that name here in the heart of his largest development felt like a cosmic punch to the gut. "How did it get her there?" he demanded, voice taut. "We're still investigating," she replied, voice hushed. "It's small, but it's chiseled in a way that's deliberate, with actual stone carving techniques. Not just some random tagger with a spray can. It's on a corner of the decorative stone panel just to the right of the building's main entrance. We can remove it, but it will leave a visible patch unless we replace the entire panel, which might take weeks to reorder and install." A swirl of memories and guilt flooded Alexander. He could still see Cassandra's tear-stained eyes the day he repainted the nursery walls. Why here, why now? Was this some act of sabotage, or was it a bizarre coincidence? He turned to his team, feigning control. "Gather the crew. Let's see this for ourselves." They walked around to the side of the building near the main entrance. Indeed, on the lower corner of a heavy stone block, in ornate script no more than 3 inches tall, he saw the name Adrian. It glinted in the morning light, as if mocking him. The cut was smooth, professionally done. Alexander felt as though the ghost of his child had found a way to appear at the very heart of his business empire. The crowd of engineers and project managers murmured, but none dared speak the name aloud again. Everyone felt the tension rippling from Alexander. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Get the best stonemason to see if it can be carefully removed without replacing the entire block," he said, scanning their faces. "And I want a full investigation. Check security footage, see who came through here. This is private property. There must be cameras." Miriam nodded. "Yes, Mr. Haven." As the group filed away, Alexander stared at the etched name. Questions churned in his mind. Was someone trying to torment him? Or was it Cassandra, grappling with the memory of Adrian in her own anguished way? He knew she was a talented designer, but stone carving was not her skill set. Still, doubt flickered. He traced the letters with his fingertips, fighting the tightness in his chest. Adrian. A child who never got a chance at life, but who somehow kept reappearing. No matter how hard he tried to erase the name, it found its way back. The day after discovering the name on the building, Alexander hardly slept. Anxiety wrapped around him like a vice fueled by a new wave of tension at home. Cassandra, though physically present at their estate, felt emotionally distant. She had withdrawn to her personal design studio behind the house, offering no explanation for her absences or solitary nights. At the office, Alexander was met with an undercurrent of gossip. Employees whispered in hallways, exchanging glances when he passed. He knew they suspected something, that the etched name must hold personal significance. The Haven Empire might have soared on the wings of success, but it also flew through corridors built on secrets and half-truths. Desperate for answers, Alexander plunged himself into the security footage from the site. Along with Miriam and a small group of trusted IT specialists, he spent hours scrubbing through camera angles. They found little out of the ordinary, no suspicious intruders, no after-hours trespassers. The building's exterior cameras had either not been angled to that specific patch of stone or were obscured by scaffolding. It was possible that someone had hidden in a blind spot, but a near-total blank didn't satisfy him. He was certain there had to be more. Someone must have had both motive and access. Then a glitch on one camera's timestamp caught his eye. A short segment no more than 15 minutes was missing from the official logs. He turned to the IT specialist, a wiry young man named Conrad. "You see this?" Alexander said, pointing to the gap. "We're missing footage between 2:30 and 2:45 a.m. last Tuesday." Conrad tapped on his keyboard, sweat forming at his temples. "It looks like a forced corruption in the data. Someone with advanced knowledge of our systems might have done this deliberately." Alexander's fury rose. He felt his hands clench into fists. "We pay for state-of-the-art security, yet here we are. I want a list of everyone who had access to these cameras that night." Conrad nodded. "Of course, Mr. Haven." As the day wore on, a handful of potential suspects emerged: employees, contractors, or external tech consultants who had the clearance to handle or manipulate the security feeds. But none stood out as having a personal vendetta to carve Adrian into the building's facade. As far as Alexander knew, that name and its significance were known only to family and a few close friends. Just before evening, he slipped away from the office to pay an unannounced visit to Cassandra's personal design studio. It was a minimalist glass annex behind their main residence, filled with sprawling drafting tables, half-finished models, and large windows overlooking a secluded garden. He found her hunched over a blueprint, wearing a plain black turtleneck and leggings. She barely acknowledged him when he stepped inside. "We need to talk," he said, his voice gentler than he intended. The tension between them was suffocating, but anger wouldn't help. She shrugged, maintaining focus on the blueprint. "About what?" He took a step closer. The name etched on the new building. Adrian. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" She stood up slowly, her eyes narrowed in astonishment. "What makes you think I would do that?" Alexander exhaled. "I'm not accusing you of anything, but you've been distant, and I know how important Adrian's memory is to you. This could be some act of grief." She paced across the studio, frustration evident. "So because I'm grieving, I'd break into your construction site in the dead of night and carve our baby's name on stone. Is that really what you think of me, Alexander?" He winced at the use of his full name. "I just need answers." Cassandra's eyes brimmed with tears. "I can't even stand looking at that building. It reminds me of what you did to the nursery, wiping away Adrian's name like he never existed. I'm not stepping foot near your precious Haven complex, let alone defacing it." Alexander stared at the floor. Guilt and suspicion clashed in his chest. He wanted to believe her. Over the years, she'd proven herself to be honorable and true, even if they were drifting apart. She picked up a small clay model she was working on, a conceptual piece for a pediatric clinic in Honduras. "This is how I honor Adrian," she said softly, tapping the model. "By designing places that help children. Because that was our dream, wasn't it? To do something meaningful for families. That dream died a little the day you repainted that room." "Stung?" Alexander nodded, unable to muster a response. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "If you remember anything that might help, or if you see anything suspicious, you'll tell me." She nodded, though her expression made it clear she believed if Alexander really cared about her, he'd know how deeply he'd wounded her. He left the studio feeling colder than when he'd arrived. Over the next week, Alexander's frustrations mounted. His father Gordon, who had been conspicuously absent for months, supposedly overseas on business, unexpectedly returned. Gordon always had a knack for appearing at the worst possible time. One evening, he summoned Alexander to the Old Haven mansion in Beacon Hill, the historic family seat that Alexander had avoided since his childhood. Alexander arrived to find Gordon waiting in the study, a cavernous room lined with dusty tomes and antique furniture that smelled like old leather. 2 crystal glasses of expensive cognac sat on the table untouched. Son Gordon said, his deep voice echoing. "I've been hearing rumors. Something about the name Adrian carved into your new building. Care to explain?" Alexander's jaw clenched. He'd never told his father the baby's name. That was a conversation he and Cassandra had reserved for themselves, at least until the time was right. But perhaps gossip traveled faster than respect for privacy in Boston's elite circles. "Nothing to explain," Alexander replied, forcing calm. "It's vandalism, and I'm handling it." Gordon's expression was measured. "I understand losing a child is hard, but you need to keep your head in the game. The city is watching, the press is circling. You're set to be the face of this grand opening. Anything that smells of scandal or strife will tarnish the Haven name." Alexander's shoulders tensed. "Is that all you care about? The name not once have you asked how Cassandra or I are coping." Gordon's straightened lips pressed into a thin line. "Grief is personal. I'm not your therapist. But I do know the family legacy must remain intact. If you can't manage to keep it that way, I will step in." The threat lingered in the room like a noxious gas. Alexander took a long sip of the cognac, letting the burn steady his nerves. He was used to his father's cold approach to family matters. Showing vulnerability in front of Gordon was akin to bleeding in shark-infested waters. "That won't be necessary," Alexander said, determined. "I've got it under control." Gordon nodded, but the glint in his eyes said otherwise. "I trust you'll do what must be done." Their conversation ended abruptly. Alexander left, feeling the old mansion's oppressive weight crushing him. He hated that place. It reminded him of lonely childhood nights locked away in a stiff bedroom, while tutors and nannies drilled into him that everything was about legacy and image. Back at the estate, he found Cassandra's design studio empty. A quick text revealed she had gone to New York for a last-minute architecture symposium. In the past, she would have told him about any travel plans. He knew she was pulling away, forging her independence again, and it both frightened and angered him. Days marched on with no new leads about the carved name. The IT team found no conclusive evidence, and the stonemasons insisted it would cost tens of thousands of dollars to fix the etched stone, and that was assuming the project schedule could accommodate such a significant delay. With the grand opening fast approaching, Alexander faced a choice: reveal the name at the event, and risk a media circus, or patch it in a rushed manner, leaving an obvious scar on what was meant to be a pristine facade. He tried to push it from his mind by immersing himself in finalizing the details of the opening ceremony. He'd invited a roster of high-profile personalities, local politicians, celebrities, and philanthropic figures, even hoping to secure a cameo from Warren Buffett, who was rumored to be investing in a sustainable housing initiative. The event in many ways was a tribute to the Haven Empire's commitment to the future. Yet as the big day loomed, Alexander couldn't shake the eerie feeling that the name Adrian was more than a mere vandalism or cosmic coincidence. It felt like a reckoning for the callous way he had tried to paint over the nursery, to bury the sorrow too quickly. At last, the morning of the grand opening arrived. A crisp autumn breeze whipped through downtown Boston, sending leaves swirling around the newly laid plaza. Technicians bustled finalizing the stage and sound systems. Towering banners bearing the Haven family crest fluttered from newly installed flagpoles. Alexander had spent the previous night practicing his speech in front of a mirror. He stood now backstage, wearing a tailored charcoal suit. Journalists with cameras angled for the best shot. Officials from City Hall mingled, and a small band rehearsed soft classical tunes. Despite the outward pomp, his mind was a tempest. He glanced at his phone, hoping to see a text from Cassandra, but there was nothing. She was back in Boston, but had not confirmed her attendance. He drew a slow breath, stepping onto the stage, as the announcer introduced him with a flourish. His speech began smoothly enough, praising Boston's heritage, the dedication of the City Council, the employees of Horizon Global Ventures, and the bright future symbolized by the Haven complex. He had a practiced way with words, honed by years of press conferences and philanthropic galas. Then his eyes caught a glimpse of someone unexpected in the crowd, Cassandra. She stood at the back, arms folded, her expression unreadable. For a moment his voice faltered, but he forged ahead. Applause peppered his speech. Lights flashed, cameras rolled. He concluded with a statement on legacy, how the Haven family strived to build not just buildings, but also hope for the next generation. The audience clapped politely. Alexander turned, motioning toward the large drape that covered the ceremonial inscription on the wall near the building's main entrance. As the drape fell away, it revealed the words, "For innovation, for progress, for the future." The crowd erupted in cheers, but the stone just beneath still carried the small yet haunting name, Adrian, now partially obscured by a subtle attempt at patchwork. The name remained legible up close, and soon curious murmurs rippled through the attendees. The tension in Alexander's stomach coiled. He stepped down from the podium, greeting officials and exchanging forced smiles. Media swarmed, some noticing the strange etching on the stone. He braced for the questions, though he prayed none would come. Yet they did. "Mr. Haven, can you comment on the name etched beneath your new inscription?" Alexander stiffened, but forced a measured smile. "We had a minor issue with vandalism. It's already being addressed." Before more questions could swarm, an older man approached someone Alexander recognized from his father's entourage, Charles Deering, a retired advisor who had served the Haven family for decades. His grey eyes flickered with concern. "We should speak privately," Charles said, guiding Alexander away from the crowd. They slipped into a side passage of the building's lobby. Smooth marble floors reflected the overhead lights. Charles wasted no time. "I believe I have information about who might have carved that name," he said. "I didn't speak sooner because I wasn't entirely sure, but new evidence came to my attention." Alexander's pulse quickened. "Go on." Charles fished an envelope from inside his coat. "Someone sent me still images from a CCTV feed, dated the night the carving must have happened. However, they're from an external camera across the street, not your official site cameras." Alexander took the envelope and peered at the black and white stills. The images showed a figure in a hooded jacket near the building's entrance. The figure stooped in the exact spot where the name was later found. Despite the angle and darkness, it was clearly not Cassandra. The person appeared stockier, with broader shoulders. He flipped through more images. One partial side view, though grainy, made his chest tighten. The face was partially visible, just enough to recognize him as Elias Ward, a childhood friend of Alexander's who had once worked at Horizon Global Ventures but left under tense circumstances. Elias's family had once been in business with the Havens, but a few years back, Elias had been ousted amid a scandal that implicated him in a questionable real estate deal. Alexander hadn't spoken to him since. He looked up at Charles. Elias. Why would he do this? Charles frowned. He's harbored resentment for a long time. It's possible he knew about your baby's name. He might have learned it from staff or overheard it from your father's lips. Shaken, Alexander clutched the photos. It made sense in a twisted way. Elias was cunning, and if he wanted to strike at Alexander's psyche, carving Adrian into the building was a cruel but potent way to do it. But how did he manage to force a corruption in our security footage? Alexander asked. He's an IT expert, or at least he has connections, Charles replied. He could have bribed someone. Rage simmered in Alexander's veins. Elias had taken a private tragedy and warped it into a weapon. The whole fiasco with the building was to undermine Alexander, to remind him that no matter how high you climb, your vulnerabilities can still be used against you. Charles placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder. Be careful. Confronting him without evidence could be risky, but at least you now know who you're dealing with. Alexander nodded, pulses of adrenaline flooding his system. The revelation brought no solace. If anything, it deepened the emotional turmoil. He glanced toward the exit, spotting Cassandra watching him from afar. Her eyes flicked from him to the envelope in his hand, curiosity evident. He couldn't confront Elias publicly, not at that moment. But he had a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. That evening, after the event ended and the crowd dispersed, Alexander found Cassandra in the estate's expansive kitchen, rummaging for a late-night snack. The overhead light illuminated her exhaustion. She looked up as he entered, the question in her gaze, wordless but clear. He set the envelope on the marble island. It was Elias Ward. She blinked, confused. Elias? I haven't heard that name in ages. He carved Adrian's name on the building. Alexander nodded, pulling out the still images and laying them before her. He had access knowledge and a grudge. It's all here. She studied the images, her face darkening. I still don't understand his motive. Revenge. I had to let him go from Horizon a few years back, after he'd jeopardized one of our major deals. He's held a grudge ever since. Cassandra let out a slow breath. So in his twisted mind, your grief became his ammunition. That's beyond cruel. Alexander reached for her hand, longing for a connection they'd both neglected. I'm sorry. For how I handled everything with Adrian. For how I erased his name from the nursery. None of this justifies that, but I want you to know I regret it. She didn't pull away. I know you hurt too, Alec, but it felt like you tried to wash him out of our lives the moment it got too painful. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I was wrong. They stood in quiet sorrow, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. For the first time in what felt like ages, they seemed united by the same sense of loss. Finally, Cassandra spoke. What are you going to do about Elias? Alexander inhaled. Confront him, but carefully. For now, I'll gather more definitive proof. Maybe we can keep it out of the courts. I just want him to understand there are consequences. Cassandra set the photos aside. I'll help however I can. It wasn't a declaration of forgiveness or a renewal of vows, but it was a step one that made Alexander's chest loosen just a fraction. 2 days later, Alexander received a cryptic text on his personal phone. We should talk. I have information you don't want made public. The bar at the Old Derby on Salem Street, 9 p.m. Come alone. It was unsigned, but the message felt like a signature of its own. Elias. Alexander hesitated. This was precisely the kind of clandestine meeting that could lead to a confrontation. Still, he needed to settle the issue. The swirl of rumors around the Haven complex had grown. Several local blogs were speculating about the mysterious name. He couldn't afford for the gossip to infect the project's reputation further, or to exploit Cassandra's private grief. At 9 p.m. sharp, Alexander arrived at the Old Derby, a dimly lit bar with dark wood booths and an ancient, dusty chandelier. No sign announced who owned it, but it was an open secret that the place was a hangout for shady deals and hush-hush conversations. He spotted Elias in a corner booth, swirling a half-empty glass of whiskey. Shorter than Alexander, but built sturdier. Elias had a face etched by cynicism. He smirked when he saw Alexander approach. "I knew you'd come," Elias said, motioning for Alexander to sit. Alexander slid into the booth, crossing his arms. "You've got a lot of nerve. Carving Adrian's name. My baby's name into my building to prove some twisted point." Elias raised a brow. "It got your attention, didn't it?" Alexander bristled. "What do you want?" Elias sipped his whiskey. "An apology. Compensation. A chance at redemption. There was a time we were close friends, Alexander. I grew up with you. We planned on conquering the world together, but you kicked me to the curb without a second thought." "You committed fraud," Alexander hissed. "I had no choice." "You always have a choice," Elias corrected. "And I might have some interesting pieces of information that, if leaked, could shine a less than rosy light on your precious Haven empire. Not to mention some personal details about your marriage." Alexander leaned forward, his eyes aflame. "Is that a threat?" "It's business," Elias said, with an indifferent shrug. "But I'll consider it a personal favor if you reinstate me into Horizon Global Ventures in a senior capacity. Give me a stake in one of your next big projects. Let me back in the game." Alexander stared at him, a swirl of disgust and pity roiling. "You'd stoop this low?" Elias raised his glass in a mock toast. "Come on. We both know what your father taught us. Success is about leverage. I have leverage now." Alexander stood. "I won't be blackmailed." Elias shrugged, unbothered. "Then you can watch me dismantle your carefully curated world piece by piece. I wonder how the press would react if they learned the real reason behind that carved name. Or if certain financial transactions were put into public record." Alexander's fists clenched, but he forced himself to walk away. Engaging in violence or an open confrontation here would only complicate matters further. As he left the bar, Elias's eyes burned into his back. Outside, the chilly air stung his cheeks, matching the fury that flared in him. Back at Horizon Global Ventures, Alexander convened a small circle of trusted advisors: Miriam Kelly, Charles Deering, and an old ally, Jessica Freeman, the firm's head of compliance. They pored over files detailing Elias's previous projects, searching for any vulnerabilities or potential wrongdoing that Alexander could use as a counter-leverage. An exasperated sigh slipped from Alexander as they found only minimal leads. Elias's misdeeds were well documented from the prior scandal, but he had skillfully wiped most records beyond that. The man was cunning, leaving little behind that could incriminate him now. Cassandra, too, joined the meetings for the first time since the miscarriage. She offered a fresh perspective, though her role was mostly supportive. Alexander felt a glimmer of their old partnership, the synergy that had once made them unstoppable. Late one evening, while scanning the older architectural plans for the Haven complex, Cassandra found a cryptic note scrawled in the margins, a note referencing a specialized vault in the sub-basement designed for data storage, one that Elias had insisted on implementing when he was still with the company. "This sub-basement vault," she said, pushing the plan toward Alexander. "Do you remember authorizing it?" He furrowed his brow, scanning the document. "Not specifically. Elias was heading security protocols back then. He might have snuck it into the design." Charles leaned in, adjusting his reading glasses. "I recall some mention of a state-of-the-art data center, but we never used it. The project was scrapped after Elias left." Cassandra tapped her pen on the blueprint. If Elias had free rein to design it, maybe he stored something there, some leverage. Miriam nodded. He might be counting on no one remembering this vault exists. It's possible he's stashed files there that he can threaten to reveal. Alexander stood. "We're going down there." Under the cover of night, Alexander, Cassandra. Miriam and Charles slipped into the Haven complex. They made their way to the sub-basement, guided by the dusty blueprint and the flicker of overhead fluorescent lights. Occasionally, a distant hum of machinery echoed through the concrete corridors. At the far end of a deserted hallway, they found the entrance to the vault, a nondescript metal door with an electronic keypad. Miriam produced a small hacking tool, courtesy of their IT department. She set to work, sweat beading on her forehead, until a faint click announced success. Inside, they discovered a chamber lined with racks meant for servers that never arrived. The air was musty thick with disuse. It took them a while to find anything unusual, until Cassandra noticed a steel cabinet in a corner. It was locked, but with a traditional padlock instead of advanced electronics. Charles pried it open with a crowbar. Inside sat a single external hard drive, labeled HGV Archives. Next to it lay a dusty stack of documents. Their hearts pounded in unison. Alexander carefully lifted the drive. This must be Elias's stash. He rummaged through the papers, spotting spreadsheets, old memos, and references to questionable deals. Some were legitimate business records, others had confidential stamped across them in thick red letters. The final sheet in the pile drew his eye a ledger listing large sums of money, moving between shell companies, including suspicious references to a Delphi Holdings, a name Alexander had never encountered. They exchanged wary glances, suspecting that Elias had compiled these documents to blackmail the Haven family or any business partners. The question was, who was the real target? Miriam frowned. He might have documented wrongdoing in the Haven Empire, possibly your father's older deals, maybe your father's or your grandfather's, or he might have forged some parts to create false accusations. Either way, it's a time bomb. Cassandra brushed her fingers over the ledger. Could it be tied to your father's secret expansions overseas? I always found it strange how hush-hush Gordon was about certain properties in Europe and Asia. Alexander looked grim. This is more extensive than I imagined. My father might have skeletons buried in places I never knew existed. Charles cleared his throat. We should get these files analyzed, sort out what's real. If some of these are legitimate records, your father could face legal trouble. A wave of fatigue washed over Alexander. Elias had set a trap. Possibly Gordon was complicit in questionable dealings. If so, exposing this could shatter the entire Haven Foundation. But burying the truth would only empower Elias's blackmail attempts. After carefully photographing the documents, they left the vault, locking it behind them. Each step up the sub-basement stairs felt heavier. Alexander's mind raced with potential scenarios, from criminal investigations to media firestorms, but overshadowing all of it was the name Adrian. How the memory of his unborn son had been twisted into the crowbar that pried open these hidden secrets. The next morning, Alexander summoned Gordon to his estate, producing the files and confronting him directly. In Cassandra's presence, the older man examined the documents without betraying much emotion. Then he looked up, eyes icy. "Elias was always a snake," he said simply. "And you've proven yourself naive for letting him collect these." Alexander's voice shook with outrage. "Don't deflect. These deals, offshore shell companies, questionable partnerships. This is bigger than Elias. Did you sign off on all this?" Gordon's jaw tightened. "I did what had to be done to keep our family's fortune intact." "Do you have any idea the lengths I went to ensure the havens remained powerful? We live in a harsh world, Alexander. Sometimes that means forging alliances and sealing deals in ways that aren't publicly palatable." Cassandra's hand flew to her mouth. "That's your justification for money laundering bribery." "Whatever else is in those documents," Gordon slammed his fist on the table. "Do not judge me. Everything I did was for the family. I built an empire for you, Alexander. And here you are, unraveling it all because some ungrateful friend decided to toss around petty threats." Alexander inhaled sharply. "Petty threats." "He carved Adrian's name on our building to torment us. Don't you understand what this means to Cassandra and me?" Gordon's gaze flicked toward Cassandra, momentarily softening. "I'm sorry about your child. Truly." But from a business standpoint, Alexander cut him off. "Stop. You can't reduce everything to business. This is our family." A tension-soaked silence stretched. Eventually, Cassandra intervened. "We need to decide what to do with Elias and with these files. If the media gets hold of this, your entire legacy is at risk." Gordon's lips thinned. "Offer him what he wants within reason, and bury this. The Haven name must remain unscathed." Alexander bristled. "No. I'm done paying for blackmail. We need to handle this differently." "Then handle it," Gordon said, rising from his seat. "But don't expect me to take the blame if you fail." He left in a swirl of expensive cologne and bitterness. Alexander clenched his jaw. Cassandra placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out," she said. But even as she spoke, fear tinged her voice. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. Alexander and Cassandra moved through the estate like ghosts, each lost in a storm of thoughts. Cassandra tried to break the silence more than once, but Alexander was too consumed with forging a strategy to defeat Elias without letting the blackmail files go public. One evening, as a cold rain battered the windows, Cassandra found Alexander in the study, staring at old family photos. He fixated on one of them, a shot of him and Cassandra in front of the nursery, just after she announced she was pregnant, both beaming with unrestrained joy. It felt like a lifetime ago. She sat beside him, sliding an arm around his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he leaned into her warmth, letting out a shaky breath. "I keep trying to hold everything together," he whispered, voice hoarse. "But maybe it's time to let it fall apart, so we can rebuild honestly." Cassandra hesitated, her fingers stroking his hair. "What do you mean? I mean, maybe we come clean. Let the authorities see those documents, see if there's wrongdoing, and if it implicates my father, so be it. I can't keep living in this twisted circle of blackmail and secrets." A tear escaped Cassandra's eye. That's a huge risk, Alec. It could destroy the Haven name. He swallowed. Our child was destroyed by secrets, too. I never told you how I truly felt after we lost Adrian, how broken I was. I tried to bury it, and it only caused more pain. I don't want to bury anything anymore. Cassandra's tears flowed freely. She cupped his cheeks, searching his gaze. I've hated you for wiping out Adrian's name, for ignoring my grief. But part of me knew you were doing it out of your own heartbreak. I just couldn't face it. Maybe I needed to hate someone. Alexander held her close. I'm sorry. Truly. I wish I could redo it all, but this is our only chance to make something right. If I have to risk the Haven name for it, I will. They held each other for a long time in silence, the patter of rain mixing with the gentle hum of their quiet sobs. Bolstered by Cassandra's support, Alexander arranged a meeting with an attorney experienced in corporate wrongdoing and whistleblowing cases. Cassandra insisted on joining, placing her own name on the line if it meant forging a path toward honesty. The attorney, Janet Huang, listened intently as they recounted the story. Elias's blackmail, the suspicious documents, Gordon's potential involvement. Janet tapped her pen on a legal pad, her brow furrowed. You could absolutely go to the authorities with this, Janet said, but the repercussions will be swift. If your father is named, the press will devour the scandal. Your business empire could face asset freezes, investor pullouts. Worst case, you might be forced out of Horizon altogether. Alexander nodded grimly. We understand. But if we let Elias hold this over us, we'll never be free. Janet leaned forward, eyes intense. There is another approach. We can compile the documents properly, highlight any legitimate wrongdoing, and strike a deal with the authorities, cooperate fully in exchange for leniency, especially if you personally had no knowledge or involvement. Then you use that official stance to face Elias. If he tries to leak anything else, it'll either be old news or overshadowed by your proactive cooperation. Cassandra looked at Alexander, and he squeezed her hand. Let's do it, he said. A week later, everything unfolded in a maelstrom. Alexander handed over the stash of documents to federal investigators. Gordon, upon learning of his son's plan, erupted in fury, threatening to disown Alexander and disclaim him from the Haven fortune. In a heated exchange, Alexander retorted that no legacy was worth sacrificing integrity. The media storm was immediate. Headlines blared, Haven Empire under investigation. Stock prices wobbled. Enemies came out of the woodwork, piling on claims and rumors. Some of the documents did implicate Gordon in shady overseas dealings, though the extent of criminal liability remained uncertain. Elias, furious that Alexander had circumvented his blackmail, attempted to leak additional documents, but they were dismissed as either already in possession of investigators or irrelevant. The worst damage fell on Gordon's personal reputation. Alexander stood poised to lose a sizable chunk of the family wealth, but ironically his public image remained relatively unscathed. In some corners, he was hailed as a man who chose the moral high ground. Cassandra stood by him, offering unwavering support through the barrage of cameras and microphones. In the midst of chaos, they found themselves drawing closer, forging a new intimacy shaped by shared adversity and honesty. Amid the swirling fallout, Alexander decided to rectify his greatest regret. While Cassandra was away at a charity event, he snuck into the old nursery. Since the day he painted over the walls, the room had remained cold, empty, and lifeless. He reopened the sealed cans of paint, carefully mixing soft blues and greys, the same palette they had originally chosen. Next, with trembling hands, he painted the name Adrian in delicate lettering on the wall above where the crib once stood. He added small embellishments, little stars, a crescent moon evoking the night sky they had once envisioned for their child's peaceful dreams. When Cassandra returned that evening, she found him in the nursery, paintbrush in hand, tears slipping down his cheeks. He gestured silently to the wall. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. She joined him, picking up a brush and adding her own finishing touches. They worked side by side, recreating what had been lost, forging a small sanctuary, not for a living child, but for a memory that would always hold a corner of their hearts. Afterward, they slumped together on the floor, leaning against the freshly painted wall. For the first time, the name Adrian brought them solace instead of sorrow. Several months later, the investigations concluded. Gordon faced penalties, steep fines, partial relinquishment of overseas assets, and a forced retirement from the board of Horizon Global Ventures. Alexander took the reins fully, albeit under the scrutiny of new compliance measures. The company survived battered but intact. For many employees, Alexander's willingness to confront corruption ignited a renewed faith in Horizon's future. Elias vanished from Boston's high society rumors, swirling that he fled the country. With no leverage left, his name faded into the background. Few missed him. During a quiet afternoon, Alexander and Cassandra strolled hand in hand through the Haven Complex Plaza. They paused at the stone panel near the entrance where Adrian had once been etched. A faint outline of the letters was still visible even after professional repairs. Instead of resentment, Alexander felt a gentle pang of remembrance. Cassandra rested her head on his shoulder. It's strange how it all turned out. Adrian's name brought so much conflict, but in the end, it brought us back together. Alexander nodded softly, kissing her temple. It's not the way I would have chosen, but I guess fate finds odd ways to guide us. She smiled through lingering sadness. I've been thinking a lot about the future, about maybe trying for another child one day. The corners of Alexander's mouth lifted. I'd like that, he whispered. And he knew, despite the scars, they were stronger than before. That evening they returned to the estate. Outside the nursery, Cassandra paused, placing her palm on the fresh paint. They didn't need to erase Adrian's memory anymore. Love and acceptance had replaced denial and guilt. In time, they would fill that house with laughter, and maybe, just maybe, Adrian's name would become a whisper of hope rather than a cry of loss. And there you have it, a tale of ambition and heartbreak, where a single etched name tore through family secrets and forced a reckoning that no one saw coming. In the end, Alexander and Cassandra found the courage to face the ghosts that haunted them, to stand up against blackmail, and to carve a new path defined not by hidden deals or erased memories, but by honesty and love.